Hello there and welcome to the Card Grotto. Today I've got a tag to share with you, adding interest to florals in a clean and simple way. So let's get started. The first way is to add interest with an embossing folder. So this is the Altenew Dreamy Daylilies 3D embossing folder. There is a coordinating die set for this folder and some coordinating stencils. I'm using the stencils, but I'm not using the die set today. I have cut a tag from Nina £110 soda white cardstock using the Altenew Terrific Tags dies, and I'm going to place the tag inside of the embossing folder, and then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. I'm trying to make it so that there are a couple of areas without the embossing, just to add a little bit of extra kind of interest onto the tag, so that there are some raised areas and some non-embossed areas as well. I'm then taking the Altenew Low Tack sticky mat and I'm placing the tag onto it so that it can kind of hold it in place while I add the colouring on top. So I'm using the Altenew Dreamy Daylilies simple colouring stencil set, and I'm popping that over the first part of the lily here, and you can see that this sticks really well to that sticky mat and it's perfect to hold it in place while I add the ink blending on top. Because I am a bit more of a clumsy ink blender, I am just going to mask off the areas that I know that I don't want to get ink on. I'm then taking the Altenew Shades of Purple Crisp Dye inks, and I'm using the two darkest shades in the collection. So I'm starting off with Deep Iris, and I'm using an Altenew mini ink blending tool. The only downside of me using this tool is that because I basically hold it straight up and down, it is really difficult to see what I'm doing, and I apologise for that, but I'm literally just going around the outside edges of this petal and kind of like the tips of them, rather than sort of the outside edges of the middle of the petal, because I'm going to add extra colour onto that with a yellow instead. So I'm just going around the outside edges. I do dab off the excess ink onto that paper that I've kind of masked off the areas with. I find that I get a smoother blend doing it that way. I'm then going in with Midnight Violet and I'm just kind of deepening that colour right on the edges. I'm then going to add some yellow to the inside. This is not something I do that often. I don't tend to mix colours that much on florals, but I find that it adds a lot of interest to them, especially on a clean and simple card. This is a tag, but obviously this could definitely be done on a card as well. So I really like how it looked, and I think I will start doing it a lot more. It happens to be that these daylilies do often have this, so I looked them up to see what they kind of look like, because I'm more used to like a stargazer lily. And so I thought that I would see what they look like, and one of the photos had this yellow in the centre and the purple on the outside, and I just thought it was so pretty, so I wanted to try and sort of recreate that look. So I used a detail blending brush from Altenew to add that yellow into the centre, and I used Sunray and Chamomile from the Golden Sunset Fresh Dye Ink collection from Altenew. So I'm just removing that stencil. I did go ahead and do a lot of the colouring off screen because it's basically just pretty much repetitive throughout the whole of colouring in these lilies, but I'm just doing the exact same thing with this lily here at the top. I go in on the outside edges with the Deep Iris, deepening it with the Midnight Violet. And the flower there at the top on the left hand side, I do add a tiny little bit of purple just at the bottom of that petal, but at the top I wanted to kind of leave it without the purple because it looked like it was kind of folded over on itself, so you probably wouldn't really see that much of the purple, and I was a little bit worried that the purple and the yellow would mix together. I'm trying to leave it so that there's a little bit of white in between, because purple and yellow generally don't tend to mix that well together. They go a little bit brown, and I obviously didn't really want that for these flowers, so I'm just being really careful here to lift off these stencils because they do stick really well to that mat. I decided not to add the stamens in a deeper colour, so I have missed one basically within the colouring of the lilies, so I am going in with that part of the stencil and just adding that tiny little stamen there at the top. And then for the leaves, I'm using the Altenew Green Valley Crisp dye inks, and I'm using the three lightest shades, which is Firefly, Grassfield and Shadow Creek. So I'm going in with the Firefly to start with, kind of adding a light layer towards, I'm focusing most of the colour towards where the leaves meet the petals, but I do want the whole thing to kind of be green, obviously. So sometimes I like to have like white on the outside edges, but because you basically can't see most of these leaves, I do want them to be a little bit darker. And then I'm focusing the two darkest shades really just where those petals meet the leaves. So going in with that darkest colour there, and I filled in these ones here at the bottom, and then I'm going to go in with the final ones here at the top. And I really like how that looks. I think it looks really pretty with the yellow in the inside and the purple on the outside. But I do just want to add a little bit of extra interest. On lilies, they do often have like speckly dots on them, so I wanted to add some of those in. So I'm taking the Altenew Tahitian Terrace dual tip brush pens. Oh, they're not brush pens, technically they're dual tip. One end is a brush pen, one end is a fine tip pen, and I'm taking the chamomile colour, which is the same colour that I used for the yellow ink, and so it's just going to kind of blend in together. It's going to give more of like a tone on tone look, but this pen is a little bit darker purely just because it's kind of more of a concentrated colour, so it's just going to add a little bit of interest, and I do think it looks really pretty in the end. I did think about going a little bit bolder and maybe adding black speckles, and I think that that would look nice as well, or maybe gold or something, but I quite like just having that tone on tone look. So I'm literally just trying to add them as randomly as possible and sort of going through the different areas here, just adding those in. So I'm focusing more sort of towards the centres of those flowers, and then kind of adding a few here and there, and then I do go back in and just randomly add a few more where I think I need them. And I do think that looks really pretty, and it finishes off the flowers quite nicely. I've then die cut another of the tags, and I'm adding some glue tape onto the back of that. And then I can sandwich the two tags together, and that's going to not only add a little bit of stability onto the tag, but it's also going to cover up that embossing. It does actually look really pretty on the back, and I didn't get any ink or anything like that on the back, which sometimes I do, but if I wanted to write a personal message onto it, I do need something a little bit flatter to be able to do that. I'm then taking some black twine, and I folded it on itself, popping that through the hole and then kind of feeding it through itself, tightening that up at the top, and then I can tie that in a bow. And then I'm just going to fiddle with the bow for a little bit, trying to get it how I want it to be. And then I can cut the ends of the tails off, and I do tend to leave them quite long. I do like quite big bows on my tags. I might add this onto a card, but I may just send it as is, so I do like having those options. I then stamped a sentiment from the Altenew Bold Sentiment set. This is one of my favourites. I've stamped it onto some white cardstock using Obsidian pigment ink, and because you can see the white core of the cardstock when I've cut it into a strip, I'm going around it with a fine liner pen. This is a brush tip pen, and I'm just kind of painting the outside edges black so it looks like it's black cardstock, so it kind of looks a bit like I embossed it rather than I stamped it in black, so it just kind of neatens it up a little bit, I think. So I did set that aside to dry for a little bit, and now I can add some foam tape onto the back. And then I'm just going to remove the backing off of that foam tape, and then I can pop that down onto the tag. And I'm just using some tweezers here so that I can kind of hover it in place, see where I want it to go before I press that down. I do think it would look nice if I added some black enamel dots to kind of bring in that black a little bit more, but I did just like it as is. I do think it looks really nice, like I say, having those two-tone colours on those petals. I'm definitely going to try and do that a little bit more often. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on my blog. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you soon.